Thanks everyone for coming today. So I thought I did an earlier. Nibbles okay? Yes, Nibbles is perfectly okay. It works out. She just wanted to go for a walk. So I think because she'd had her teeth cleaned in the morning, she didn't get a proper walk, and so she was busting to go to toilet. And because I live in a unit, she can only go for a walk when I take her out. So it was a bit unusual because usually I take her for a walk in the morning. So apologies for cutting my last one short because my dog Nibbles, for those who don't know, had her teeth cleaned at the dentist this morning and she's a bit drowsy, but she's fine. Yeah, she just wanted to go for a walk. She actually was really full on energetic on the walk, so she's more than okay. I might be a helicopter parent when it comes to dogs, so that might be a problem. Um, but thank you for coming back for the people who have. I just wanted to hi Dave, thanks for coming back onto the podcast. Um, so I think where I was lost vibes, thank you. I think where I was talking about last time, I want to sort of talk about a bit more is the um, the way Donald Trump has has basically, in a way, um, normalized a lot of things in America. And one of the things that is normalized is, I think, the Heritage Foundation. So if you look at the Heritage Foundation, um, and that's okay. Additional love is both directions. Yeah, that's good. Trump is killing. Yeah. So I think the Heritage Foundation today came out and they did a video, and obviously it's like the conservative think tank and a lot of that stuff, and basically came out today and said, because Nick Fuentes, and I don't know how many people on Substack know much about Nick Fuentes. I'm guessing you know a little bit about him. He's like a 25, 26-year-old um, far right Nazi. And when I say Nazi, I actually mean like, I don't just mean like sometimes people say Nazi, but they don't really mean it's not really a Nazi. But this particular person, Nick Fuentes, is part of this group called the Groyper Movement. It's like a white nationalist movement. Dave from Nazi, yeah, exactly. And so there's nothing. And the thing about it is he's not trying to hide it, right? So he's out and proud about it, right? He doesn't believe the Holocaust happened. He thinks it was exaggerated. It's not when he talks about Israel and Palestine. He's not talking about the Palestinian people. He's talking about Jews, and he was talking about, so to him it's not an Israel thing; it's a Jewish thing. So again, I'm separating him from other people who criticize Israel, and he for a long time is peace prize. Yeah, for a long time, Nick Fuentes was pushed to the side as like a side figure. He was a Trump supporter, but the Trump a lot of people in the Trump administration, even though he did have dinner, Nick Fuentes had dinner with, I think you remember back years ago, with Nick Fuentes, Trump did, and Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. And of course, Kanye West was going around the country saying, I love Hitler. So, of course, he was hanging out with Nick Fuentes. So there you have. And the interesting thing about Nick Fuentes, if you know his last name, is he's got a parent who comes from Mexico. So he's not, so again, like he's like this white nationalist, right? Who who's basically got immigrant parents. So it's all a bit weird. A lot of people in his white nationalist movement are also black. They're from other sort of brown, black, that sort of thing. It's in fact, it's an amazing for a white nationalist movement how many people they have who are not white in that movement. So, and I think the reason for that is because such a big part of America is not white. The majority of Americans have parents who come from somewhere else or this and that. So you can't. It's very hard to start a white nationalist movement in 2025 when most of the country are not white nationalists. And the leader of the group is called Nick Fuentes. It's the whole thing's a bit weird. But he's always, even though he did have dinner with Trump and all that, he was generally pushed to the side to some degree from the Trump administration, at least from other people around him. And he was taken off Twitter. He wasn't allowed to go on YouTube. He was pretty much deplatformed on a lot of things. But recently, um, he's becoming more mainstream in the MAGA movement, very mainstream actually, and to the point where Nick Fuentes is now was interviewed by Tucker Carlson a couple of days ago, and Tucker Carlson, in my opinion, is like a Christian nationalist, white Christian nationalist, but he does make an effort to try to hide it. You know what I mean? His thoughts. He doesn't come out and just say what Nick Fuentes says. So he's always got this deniability about Tucker Carlson, right? And who knows with Tucker Carlson whether he actually means what he says, because when he was at Fox News, Tucker Carlson, during the whole Dominion lawsuit, when the Dominion machines sued Fox News, they got all the Kanye asked Trump to run as his VP at the dinner, pissed Trump off. Yeah, okay. Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah. So I think Trump did try to sort of distance himself a little bit from that. But now what I'm finding is that um, the Trump administration is becoming a little bit more open about what it feels like, what it feels. And part of that is when the leader from South Africa came to the United States not that long ago, and they were in the Oval Office, and then suddenly Trump says, just out of the blue, this is one of the most surreal things I've ever seen in my life, besides the Zelensky thing. And hi, Car, nice to see you. Nice to see you. And basically, he pulls out a projector, goes on TV, the lights come down, and he shows a video, and that video is about white South Africans, you know, being slaughtered by black people, and that's the thing. Like, now I thought that was so strange. Here you have the leader of South Africa, and you're like ambush him with a video. But by the way, most of the video was either taken out of context or wasn't actually real. In one case, part of the video was completely different African country. It wasn't South Africa. I think it was, I can't remember what it was. Might have been South Sudan. So again, so we already got a mindset. And then recently, in the last couple of days, we found out that Trump's refugee policy is changing. And his refugee policy is going to go down to 7,500 people a year, which is very low for a country the size of America. But he's going to prioritize white South Africans mostly, right? So again, like, I'm not one of those people who just says racist and all this just because of something. When I use that word, I really want to, because I don't want to, because if you call too many people racist and you call too many people Nazis, then the word stops losing its meaning, right? And it stops losing its power. So I'm always very careful when I use those words. But if you look at the entirety of what's happening specifically in Trump at the moment, with only letting in South Africans, white South Africans, right? Um, the whole, Tucker Carlson thing with, basically cozying up to Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes, the Heritage Foundation, basically making a video today saying that they like Tucker Carlson, apparently. They like some of his views. And also that in the Heritage video, he basically said, we're not big fans of, we don't agree with everything Nick Fuentes says, but we feel that it's important that he has a voice within the party. So they're inviting Nick Fuentes into the mainstream MAGA movement. Now, just to understand how crazy this is again, is for the last couple of months since Charlie Kirk was killed, all we've heard from the MAGA movement is how the left are assassins, they're murderers, they're complicit in the killing, right? They kept saying they all the time. It was always they. It wasn't like the actual person who did it. And so again, it was all this, so we got all this stuff, that and then they would always say the left needs to stop calling us fascists. The left needs to stop calling us authoritarians. The left needs to stop saying these things. And here we are 2 months later, and they're inviting Nick Fuentes who is an out and proud like Nazi, into the fold of the MAGA movement is like, well, and then a couple of weeks earlier, we had the young Republicans. We had all their messages on Signal released, and on that one, we got to see them say things like "I love Hitler" and all this other stuff. Some of it was joking, but you know what I mean. Like a lot of it was pretty bad stuff. And so now you have, and then of course JD Vance comes out, and JD Vance says, "Well, you know, um, these are just young people letting off steam." Well, the truth is, some of these young people were in their 30s. And also, when Charlie Kirk was killed, and young people online was either saying, "I don't care," or making memes about it, he wanted to get those people deplatformed. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say young people say stupid stuff, make memes and all this sort of stuff, when it's your party doing it, but when it's people online making memes about Charlie Kirk and you want to deplatform them, I mean, a lot of these people online doing that are young guys. So there's a hypocrisy there of that sort of thing. And young Republican leaders, exactly, Dave. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And Dave, Dave, exactly, because uh, they tried to make it out like these were like 14-year-olds or 15-year-olds, when the reality was is they were like in their late 20s, 30s. That sort. They weren't super young. So, and they were leaders within the Republican movement, as like Dave said. So there is this new thing that's happening that didn't really happen in Trump's first term as much as like what we're seeing now. And that is that they're starting to see, they're being open about sort of being Christian white nationalists, and a lot more open about it than they were in the past. And they're really like the fact that you would cherry pick a country, right? You could put, there's probably 40 other countries before white South Africans are in trouble, right? Hi, Natasha. Good to see you again. Yeah, there's like 40 or 50 other countries before, right? Before Trump, before South Africa. So why would you go to white South Africans as the people that you're going to give favorable treatment for? Just is just crazy. And I can't see the argument for it. I feel like America is heading towards a white America policy where it's all about either white South Africans or white Europeans. Because if you actually look at it, you can actually see that they've made some concessions for Europeans as well. And I guarantee you those Europeans won't be Muslim or black Europe, they will be white Europeans. So, and I think there's a couple of things going on here. I think they've basically they've basically tried to become the victims. They have somehow turned identity politics back, right? So identity politics on the left used to be about um, disenfranchised black people, women. You're correct, Joe, and it's horrible. Yeah, you remember like when the left talk about identity politics, they're talking about black women, black people. They're talking about uh, poor people. They're talking about minority groups. But what Trump and MAGA have tried to do, and I think to success to some degree, because I don't feel like what I'm talking about is really that big of a deal in the media. Like it's barely talked about. But you have a president. Think about this. Could you imagine if could you hi again my internet. Thanks, Natasha. And could you imagine Joe Biden, right, saying, well, from now on, we're only going to let in white people into the country, right? Now, MAGA probably like that idea, but that would have been all over the news. But with Trump, he's there and MAGA, they've flipped identity politics. They've made identity politics no longer about minority groups. They've made identity politics and the victimhood about white people. White people are now the victims, right? The whole, so when Trump showed that video with about South Africa and people, white people die in South Africa, he wanted to turn them into victims. It's all about white people are now the victims. It's now identity politics about white people and they are now the victims. and it's like poor me, right? So I think to some degree they've been successful with that, not fully, but just because because it doesn't make any sense because white people are not being victim. I mean, you can have racism against white people. It does exist, right? And you can be, and certainly, you know, I don't choose. I don't look at someone based on their race, and in my opinion, I think politicians and the Democrats should stay away from identity politics because you want to bring as many people into the party to vote for you, no matter who they are. So I prefer when a political party talks about um, policies because you can talk about black people, minority groups without actually saying that because you can make policies that will more favor those groups without saying it. It reminds me of when Joe Biden, Joe Biden, who I loved, Joe Biden said, "I'm going to have a a black vice president, a black female vice president." Right. So, I mean, now on the one hand, you could say that's a nice thing to say, but that is kind of patronizing to Kamala Harris. And so I just read Kamala Harris's book, I think I said earlier, for people who already listen to this. And she didn't like that. She didn't like the fact that Joe Biden went out and said, I'm going to get a black white president, because that straight away gave MAGA, Trump, ammunition to use against her and say she's DEI because she was only hired because she's a black female, not because she's the best. And so even though Joe Biden didn't say it to be mean, I think there is a problem. That's the problem with some identity politics, as that it can come across as patronizing to some of the people who's been done. And what Biden should have said is, I'm going to hire the best vice president for the job, and then he picks Kamala Harris, right? Not I'm going to hire a black, but it's like, well, okay, well then, how do we know it's the best? So identity politics can be used in the wrong way, right? So, but I think what Trump and MAGA have done is they've flipped it. They've flipped the script. And now it's like white identity politics. It's all about the white person. They've been badly done by. Um, you know, Joe Biden brought in all these immigrants because they wanted to get people to vote for him. Actually, all the data shows that actually doesn't. That's actually not true. So, a lot of immigrants who come from Mexico or other countries, they're actually conservative in terms of their socially. They're socially conservative. So it wouldn't take much and Trump did well with the Hispanic vote, way better than most people expected. So, and also, instead of trying to demonize them, the MAGA party could actually bring them in by saying, we're conservatives, you're conservative, you should vote for us, because a lot of people vote on culture, not as much on some people vote on culture as well as economics. So this craziness. So I do feel this whole thing of the new policy of the Trump administration of bringing in white South Africans, um, white South Africans is basically a way for them to try to get, they think in their head, to get more white people to vote for them. Because if they genuinely believe that Biden was trying to get in people like from Mexico who are going to vote for Biden more, then maybe they're thinking, you know what, let's get a whole bunch of white South Africans in because they'll vote for us. I mean, it's just, I have no idea whether it's strategy or whether they actually believe it. I don't know. It's hard to tell, because I do believe people like Stephen Miller um, are actually quite bad people. Like Stephen Miller is, you know, to me, just come across as something like a bit strange. Like he's ultra religious, and this goes back to what I was saying before about the Republican Party. You don't hear much about separation of church and state anymore. Very rarely do people talk about church and state separated. In the old days, like even with John McCain, they would often talk about it. But now it's not talked about. And the reason is because the MAGA movement is, in my opinion, doesn't see a separation of church and state anymore. It sees Christianity as part of the American movement, as part of being an American is being a Christian. And if you're anything else, then you're not part of real America. So I think, and you see that with Turning Point USA and all that sort of stuff. So I think a lot of these people are becoming more nationalistic. They're becoming more Christian nationalists, something that we haven't really seen to the same degree as we have before. I don't even hear the Dems talking much about separation of church and state. In my opinion, that's a really big thing about a country, is that you separate the religion from the actual administration that you have. So again, I think, the fact that they never talk about that stuff, I think is a big thing. You got JD Vance, who just a couple of days ago, so I know we said this last year, but just a couple of days ago, JD Vance was being interviewed by a right-wing Australian called Miranda Devine. She's actually an Aussie, but I think she lives in America now. And she works for the New York Post, which is like a Murdoch right-wing. And she's got a podcast on there. And she interviewed JD Vance. And during that interview, he started talking about Haitians and how they were all eating cats and dogs. So a year on, he's still talking about Haitians eating cats and dogs. So there's this like concerted effort within the MAGA movement to demonize Black people who come from other countries, to demonize Black people within the country. I don't know if you've seen that. There was a young Ukrainian woman. I think she was 21, 22. She was on a train, and there was a Black guy standing behind her, and he started stabbing her. I think everyone knows that story. It's like a horrible, horrible story, right? A horrible thing that he did. And MAGA will share that all the time, and they will say never again. And they will show pictures of that girl with Charlie Kirk stopping the killer. So Charlie Kirk's hand. So they're conflating him being Black with he must be a Democrat, therefore he must be left wing, right? Therefore he must be therefore they're violent. So they're making this big conflation between violence. So nobody knows, like a random Black guy who had a severe mental illness, and then suddenly it's a Democrat-Republican thing, right? And that's what they do. They did that. And so they put that together because it happened around the same time with Charlie Kirk being killed. And it's like, well, what's this random Black guy killing a white woman got anything to do with Democrats or, people on the left? It had nothing to do with it. But again, it's like this concerted demonization of the Black Haitians are eating cats and dogs. Black people are stabbing people, right? BLM, they keep talking about BLM all the time, like it happened like 2 days ago, right? They've got now a new refugee policy, which is mostly only for white South Africans, right? You've got Trump calling people from Mexico, calling them rapists and all this sort of stuff. Ridiculous, peddling that bullshit in the first place and still discussing stupid. Yeah, Dave, exactly. Yeah. And the fact, here's the thing, right? When I saw, like, because I just read Kamala Harris's book and I've seen her interviewed, during one of the interviews, what came up was that during the debate, when Donald Trump starts talking about how the Haitians are eating cats and dogs during the debate. And by the way, that debate with Kamala Harris, she absolutely floored him. And I'm saying that from someone who thinks that Biden did really bad. So this isn't like a partisan thing. I would, if I thought she didn't do well, I would say it. I like to be honest about that. She absolutely floored him. The best part was when she baited him. She absolutely baited him by saying, she brings up crowd sizes and that his crowd sizes weren't actually that big. And then he just loses it. He goes crazy. And she's just got a smirk on her face. She absolutely baited him. Yeah, she flooded him. Yeah, it was so funny to see. And what I found funny about that was that during that period, people in MAGA and Trump were saying that Kamala Harris can't be president because she would be manipulated by Putin. Putin would absolutely Xi Jinping and Putin would manipulate her. And here she is on a debate stage manipulating Trump with the most easiest manipulation of talking about crowd sizes. If Kamala Harris can manipulate Trump over crowd sizes, imagine what Putin or Xi Jinping could do to Trump. And now we've already seen it, right? Putin doesn't take him seriously. Every time they get on the phone together, even even Trump has admitted this. Every time Putin and Trump get on the phone, Putin says things that he wants to hear, and then boom, they throw more bombs into Ukraine. They increase it. In the last 9 months since Trump has been in power, Russia has increased attacks on Ukraine, not decreased it. If what he's saying is true, right, if that they were scared of him, then why are they increasing it? The same thing with Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping, whatever you say, he won the trade war. There's no doubt about it. He won that trade war. So again, that whole narrative of Kamala Harris would be an awful president because she'd be easily manipulated. That debate showed that was complete and utter crap. And I thought that was an interesting bit. And she was talking about that because of a book the last couple of days about her debate with Donald Trump and how it basically she knew she won that debate. She knew she did really well. And during the debate, Donald Trump brings up the Haitians are eating cats and dogs. Now, what she actually said in one of the interviews is that is what I said. Let me go there. I think it's important to remember that the BRICS nations won the trade war, not just China. The US is getting spanked by the global South. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and and the other thing is, yes. So during the debate, Trump starts bringing up the Haitians are eating cats and dogs. Now, Kamala said in one of her recent interviews is that she didn't actually know about that story until that morning of the debate. Because she'd been too busy. She'd been off trying to work on her debating skills. And so when he said it, one of her advisors had said to her, "Oh, by the way, when you debate Trump, he might bring up something about cats and dogs, Haitians." And she just looked at the advisor and she thought to herself, that guy's an idiot, right? Because he was like a young advisor. And so she didn't take it seriously. So when he actually brings it up and you see her laughing, she's partly laughing because she made fun of that advisor for telling her. And now here he is actually saying it. And she couldn't believe what was coming out of Trump's mouth. Now, the thing about it is that they did demonize that thing. Now, Trump, I always have a thing with Trump where I never know if it's just stupidity or if he's doing it on purpose. And I have to say that over the last year or so, I've never thought he was a genius, but I thought he was a little bit smarter than what he is because when you think about it, Trump is not like some of his base. Trump grew up in a rich family, was sent to the best schools, was sent to a good university, all this sort of stuff. He was surrounded by people probably they weren't all dumb. And so she still reacted appropriately about the cats and dogs. Yeah, that's right, Dave. She just laughed. She laughed. What else could you do? You just laugh. But Trump, so that makes me think, oh, well, how could he be this dumb? But it's amazing he is. You've just summed up the entire issue the Democrats have been having. They simply cannot comprehend the MAGA mentality. Yeah. And I think this is the thing. Like, I think, there is a part of America. If this was Trump, like when you see him at the debate and he talks about cats and dogs, right? The thing is that if that happened 10 years earlier and he was talking about cats and dogs, I think he would have lost it. I think he would have lost the election. But things have been so normalized, and it's not just Trump, it's social media. during COVID, people were on Facebook and they were coming up with the wildest conspiracies. It used to be years ago that conspiracy theories or people who I mean, everyone has one or two conspiracies, right? But people who are like obsessed with conspiracy, like I mean obsessed, they can't that's all they do. Those type of people were maybe like 1% of the population. They were like a minority. These days, you could probably get half the population, maybe even more, who are very much into conspiracies. And they usually start a conversation with, I'm not really into conspiracies, but, and then they'll go on to tell you 10 different ones. There was a second shooter on the grassy knoll. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know about that one. Yeah, yeah. But, but, what I'm saying, I'm more talking about people who just everything's a conspiracy. Everything. They come up with 100 conspiracies a day. And social media normalized that, normalized that conversation. Like when I was in the 90s and early 2000s, before social media was a thing, if you're in a work environment, nobody would say much about conspiracies. Maybe the JFK one, it's a little bit different, right? That was a bit more mainstream. But other types of conspiracies, like Alex Jones ones, they were not very mainstream and people would be too embarrassed to talk about. But I've been in work environments or I've been around people in business environments or I work in marketing, that environment, and they will just talk about the wildest conspiracies in a business environment and nobody cares. Nobody thinks differently of them. And then someone else will go, yeah, actually, did you know about this and that? There's no longer a filter about that stuff, right? It's now been completely normalized. I think there was, Susu, I believe. Okay, yeah, Laura Loomer. Yeah, Laura Loomer, who to me is the Rasputin of the MAGA movement. I'm going to copyright that because I think, I really do think she's like the Rasputin. If you know much about Rasputin from the Soviet Union or Russia back then, she really is like that person. But, yeah, that's what I mean. Like someone like Laura Loomer is like, people say, oh, Laura Loomer, what do you talk about her? Laura Loomer has millions of followers. She has the ear of Donald Trump. So just so you know, the cats and dogs thing came from Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer had spent the 2 days earlier obsessing about Haitians are eating cats and dogs. Laura Loomer then goes and has lunch with Donald Trump, and the next day is the debate, and she starts talking about it. So the eating the cats and dogs came partly from Laura Loomer. The trajectory of the Flat Earth Society is another prime example of what has happened with conspiracy theories over the last few days. Yeah, exactly. Like flat Earth is now like if you know someone who's a flat earther, people just laugh. She has more than his ear. Yes, Dave, we don't. I can't speculate on that. But I got to say, like for someone that young, like Laura Loomer, I think is like early 30s. It's early 30s, but she's got the most ridiculous plastic surgery I've ever seen in my life. Like it's insane. It's insane plastic surgery, and like I have more sympathy for people. Like I have more sympathy for people when they're older. You know, it's not for me. I wouldn't do it. So I say that now, but in 10 years' time, who knows? So, but but maybe a bit of Botox around the eyes. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe a bit of Botox. Um, but yeah, but I think basically, I think a lot of this stuff with like plastic surgery and the MAGA movement is a very strange thing because a lot of these people, they're in their 30s and 40s, they're really young. So it doesn't make even any sense to me. But I think Laura Loomer is one example of how they've normalized craziness and basically, QAnon and all that stuff. It's all been normalized. It's no longer some like sideline, thing on the internet, like on the dark web. It's talked about all the time. So Trump, when he says they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, he's no longer talking to the same population that he would have been talking to 10 years earlier. That population that he's now talking to last year, a lot of them have been through COVID. And a lot of people went down rabbit holes during COVID, right? So in 2024, the cats and dogs thing was more popular than people realized. And often online, what people would say is, MAGA would say, because I was on Twitter, they would say, well, actually, there's truth to that story because there's someone on Facebook said something. So the evidence was that someone on Facebook actually said something. The MAGA face phenomenon is just cult behavior. One prominent charismatic person in the cult doesn't everyone else wants to replicate the results. Yeah, that's right. And I think, so again, you know, the people basically, you know, doing the conspiracies is they're so normalized now that it doesn't seem like a really crazy thing for him to say that. And because people had heard the story online about someone on Facebook saying that they'd seen a person eating cats and dogs, then what happened is someone else on Facebook shared a photo. This photo got showed everywhere on Twitter, everywhere. And it was a photo of a black man somewhere in America. Nobody knows where that person was in America. They don't know if that person is Haitian. It's just a black man in America. They think it's in America, and he's holding a dead duck, right? And that's the evidence. When she later apologized, yeah, that's true. She later apologized for sharing that story. That's true. Yeah. But the thing is you can't, nobody cares. So when I mentioned that she apologized for that, MAGA just said, well, she just said that because she was felt pressured. So they don't even care about that, the fact that she apologized. But then they showed the picture of the black man with the duck. And I was talking to someone on Twitter, publicly on Twitter. They're like a Twitter, they're an influencer, and they're a MAGA influencer on Twitter. And I said, well, so your evidence is a black man holding a dead duck that Haitians are eating cats and dogs? And he said, well, there is some truth to it. And so his argument is, okay, we don't have evidence of a Haitian eating a cat or a dog, but we do have evidence of a black man with a dead duck. Born and grew up in America, I'm totally disgusted that my fellow Americans would believe such nonsense. Yeah. So so what they're saying is, okay, so maybe it wasn't cats and dogs, but he wasn't far off. Right? So, like, this is the insanity. There was some truth to it. No, a random black person holding a dead duck is not the same as a Haitian eating cats and dogs. We don't even know the backstory of that story or anything. I'm not. It's exactly what I've come to expect from fellow USPS. So it's insane how many people can get away with it. So again, you can just say a lot of crazy stuff now, and people don't care. Like they and even if they don't believe you, even if they go, well, I'm not sure about that, they don't think you're crazy. So that's the difference, right? In the old days, you would be considered a nutcase. People would go, oh, that guy's, stay away from that guy. Stay away from him. He's a little bit, don't go next to it. Now it's like, oh, yeah, I'm not sure if I believe. I mean, I'm not dismissing it, but I don't think I believe it. But they're not considered crazy people anymore, right? So, like, they're just considered part of normal society. And so, in that context, Trump can get away with so much lies because it's like a postmodern. So I was saying this before my first video. We now live, Trump has taken on postmodernism, right? Where truth is no longer objective. Truth is now subjective. If Trump believes they were eating cats and dogs, well, that's his belief, right? Well, the CIA could do MK. Why couldn't it be true to it? Is part of the logic involved, I think. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, I always go with, I think human beings, I'm not saying conspiracies don't exist. Human beings are very, very bad at keeping secrets. Very bad. You can't get five people, and you can't get five people in a room to keep a secret. So the idea that, for example, there's an alien ship at Area 54 and nobody knows anything about it, right, is like, no, you couldn't keep that secret, right? So I just don't believe you can keep that secret. It's like the King's March, the King's protest. And everyone was saying that George Soros was paying everybody. So everyone, everyone who was showing up was getting a check by George Soros. So there was like 5 or 7 million people who apparently got a check. Now think about 5 or 7 million people. Now Fox News and MAGA couldn't find any evidence that any people were receiving money, but but they expect people to believe that 5 to 7 million Americans kept it on the down low that they got money. Like that is insane. You couldn't get 10 of those people to keep a secret like that, let alone 5 to 7 million. That is not the real Americans disgusting with what's been happening. Yeah. Again, and look, I know that I'm not saying it's all America. Absolutely not. I know it's not all America. I mean, you know, this is the truth. Alternatively, the real US that is simply rising up from the cave. Yeah. The, I think a third of America voted for Trump, around a third voted for Kamala, and a third didn't vote at all. So I certainly don't think it's the majority of Americans at all. At all. I don't think that at all. I think the majority of Americans are reasonable people. The majority of Americans don't believe any of this stuff. And and when I hear fellow Australians say things like all Americans are stupid or all American, because Trump got voted in twice, I actually I actually push back on that, and I say that's actually not true because in America you have a very different system that we have in Australia. In Australia we have compulsory voting, and with compulsory voting it brings out all the people in the middle who are generally centre left, centre right, or centrist, and they would never vote for a Trump. And because it's compulsory voting, so yeah, voters, yeah. So it's definitely not. I think it's also with the fact you've got the electoral college where you have to pander to 7 states. That's crazy as well. But I mean, I do think there's ways around this for the Democrats, and I think the way to get around this craziness is to not. I don't think it. I don't. To be honest, I don't think it. I don't think. I think the problem with Kamala Harris and people like her, and I say this with the most respect because I like her, is that they're fighting an old war, right? They're fighting a 2012 election in a 2024 or 2028 environment. They're not the right people for this time. They might have been the right people 5 years ago. In this environment, Kamala Harris comes across as too professional. She comes across as a little bit too robotic. She comes across as too, too thoughtful about what she says. And in this environment, it's people who come across as authentic that are more likely to win. Compulsory voting terrifies me because the large percentage of my fellow citizens use I don't want to vote. Last minute, yeah. Now, if you look at I can understand why you would say that, but if you actually look at the evidence of why compulsory voting works, is that compulsory voting shows that a lot of people who don't vote are not the crazies. It's actually the people in the middle who say both sides are as bad as each other, but they're more likely to vote for a centrist Democrat or centre-left Democrat than they would for Donald Trump. So the reason why, and the other thing is, and I don't know how much you know about it, we don't have compulsory, because I spoke to Joe Walsh, Joe Walsh, about this when he had me on his podcast. And Joe Walsh is a libertarian, right? He hates Trump, but he's a libertarian. And I said to him, well, you guys should get compulsory voting because it would help not get someone like Trump win. Because he's a libertarian, he goes, I don't want the government telling me how to vote. Now, this is where I have to put a little bit of understanding around. You're not going to go to jail if you don't vote. It's like a $20 fine, and all you need to get out of it is you just email someone. You email someone and say, I was sick, and nothing happens to you. But what it does is it creates a culture of people. People in Australia see voting as a civic duty, right? It's a civic duty. And why is it so bad for people to see voting as a civic duty? It's something that you do once every 4 years. You're part of society, right? Yeah, a culture of participation, exactly. It's like one of the most important things you can do. And what it does is it encourages, so in our high schools, because it's compulsory voting, you're taught more about civics. And you're taught more about, okay, well, you're about to turn 18. So let's say you're 17, you're in high school, you're about to turn 18. The high school will say, hey, this is how you vote. This is how you get information about voting. And so you become more engaged in voting. And what did the 2024 election show? The less informed people were, the more they voted for Trump. The more informed people they were, the higher they voted for Kamala. So if you get more people involved in politics, get more people informed, they generally would vote for someone outside of Trump. So I don't think Trump could win in Australia because the middle would be forced to come out to vote. Not forced, but they would be being told. See, I know people who don't follow politics like I do. But I will say to them, oh, who are you going to vote? Are you going to vote? And they'll go, yeah, haven't really been paying attention, but there's a couple of weeks out and they'll do some research. They say, look, I'm going to go on and find out what their policies are. I wasn't big on Kamala before and as a VP, but she won me over as a candidate. Yeah, exactly, Dave. I'm always in favour of more days off work, but as an anarchist, I feel compelled to mention that I'd like to be voting on a very different thing than we are now. Yeah. Okay. I'm not an anarchist, so I probably wouldn't agree with you on that bit, but I know what you mean in terms of if you mean like the thing about Australia is this is the other crazy thing. You guys vote on a Tuesday when people have to go to work. How is that? That is insane. Like, we vote on a Saturday, which is like a weekend, obviously. Um, on a Saturday, which is a weekend, you want to vote for policy. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'll get to that in a second, actually. And so we vote on a Saturday. You have 2 weeks earlier voting. You can do 2 weeks early voting as well. And we make it really easy for people to vote. So people will vote. You go to like a place to vote and you literally go straight in. I think the longest I've ever waited to vote is 5 minutes. It is so easy. There are so many places you can vote. You're in and out really quickly. And the main day you can vote for 2 weeks earlier. The main day is actually not too crazy either. If you vote on, because so many people pre-vote, but on the actual main day, they also have we have a thing called democracy sausage, all right? So democracy sausage is when you show up at a voting booth, they're generally in like schools. They put them in schools because it's the weekend, so there's no school. And they have people on a barbecue, right? And they have sausages, like a sausage on bread. So it's like a sausage in a bread, and people buy that. It's called a democracy sausage. And people just go there with their families and they'll put like tomato sauce or ketchup on there, and it's all part of the day out. So you have your like little democracy sausage there. So it's like a day out sort of thing. We have started to have early voting here and mail-in vote, all things Trump administration. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The whole thing about the Trump administration is to make it as hard as you can to vote. We don't have gerrymandering here either. And, it's just the stuff that, gerrymandering, making it harder for people to vote, all that sort of stuff. It's just like it helps the right-wing people here in Australia. If you obviously that's because it is an administration, it is a regime. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say is in Australia we have the Westminster system, and I don't know how much you know about it, but it's like what they have in Canada and the UK and a lot of parts of Europe. And in America, because it's a republic, you vote for the president. So it's almost like a cult of personality around the person, right? Because you're voting for that person. In a Westminster system like Australia, you do have a prime minister, so you have a leader, but you vote for the actual party. So you're voting for the party in itself, right? The actual who decides who the leader is the actual party. So it would be the Democrats who would decide who they're going to, I guess in a way like what happened with Kamala Harris. Now, to some people, that might seem like we don't have primaries because the party decides who the leader is, and then we decide which party we want to vote for, right? Now, obviously, they choose the leader based on popularity as well. A political party in Australia is not going to vote for a leader who's not popular. So, in a way, there is like unofficial primaries because they want to win the election. And so they will pick the person who does the best in the polling, and that person will become the leader, right? So there is some type of primary because they will, people before an election will go out and try to, it's unofficial, but, and if they become more popular in the public, that party will more likely vote for them. However, you could vote for that party and then that party could get rid of that prime minister at any time. They would have to get the votes of the majority of the people, the majority of the administration, to get rid of them. And the reason for that is because the way they look at it is historically is that a lot of people, when you see a leader on TV, you don't know who that person is. You only see them from what they're on TV. But then behind the scenes, they could be a completely different person. They could be great on TV, but they could be complete narcissists off TV, or they could be primaries, as you say, are a joke. The party decision, in point of fact, because they are the ones that can fund for a favoured candidate. And the other thing is that although some people would go, okay, well then I don't get to pick who it is. We don't just have two parties. You do have two main parties, right? Like you do, but we also have more parties. Like we have the Greens Party on one side. You have the One Nation Party, which is like the far right wing party here, and you have independents, and you have all these. So you have so you have more choices to who to vote. We also have preferential voting, which is like ranked choice voting over there. So when you go to vote, you can vote Greens, and then you could vote number 2, the centre left party. So to give an example, in Pennsylvania last year, you had some people who didn't want to vote for Kamala Harris because of what was happening in Israel. Right, you guys aren't as locked into two-party systems as we are. Must be nice, better. Yeah, it is. You look, in saying that, the chances are is that I live in PA, Pennsylvania. Yeah, the chances are is that the centre left or centre right party is going to win. That's the truth. But the other parties will pick up seats, right? They'll pick up seats in the House of Representatives, or they'll pick up seats in the Senate. And what happens is that the Senate is usually very close. So one major party, so you have two major parties, they won't have enough seats by themselves to govern by themselves. So they will rely on crossbench, like the Greens or other parties, to help them get legislation through. So they have to negotiate with other parties. So in a sense, you're not gonna the minor parties aren't gonna win, but they have a lot of power, because a lot of times the main parties will need some of those people to get legislation across. So they have to rely on consensus from across exactly. Yeah. So like, for example, the centre left party, which is like the Democratic Party, they would have to negotiate with the Greens, who are further to the left, right, to get stuff across. And what the Greens might do is say, let's say the centre left party says, we want to put more money into dental care for older people, right? And the centre left party, because they're more conservative, will say, let's put $40 million in. And the Greens party will say, I'm not going to help you pass that legislation unless you make it $100 million. And so it pushes the centre left party more to the left. You know what I mean? Because it has to negotiate with the other party. Now, so in that sense, you have more polarity of views in the party. And it's not about the one leader. It's not about the prime minister. It's about the parties, right? It's about individuals in the party. And in a way, I prefer that, because I don't like the cult of personality. When you vote for the Democrats and you vote for Republicans, in reality, you're voting for the whole party, right? But we don't have things like executive actions. So the prime minister doesn't have unilateral powers like he does in America. He has to get support from his whole party. He might have to get support from other parties, depending on how he did in the election. So there's not this one person god in the Australian election. And that's generally why you find that the leaders in our countries are more boring. I wouldn't say boring, but they're like, they're not like Donald Trump, because they don't have to, they're not trying to, you know, get out their base like Trump does with saying crazy things because everyone comes out to vote. He doesn't have to try to um, appeal to, and he has to appeal to his own party. He has to appeal to other parties to get legislation across. So he has to be respectful to everybody. Right, as a constitutional parliamentary system, right? Westminster, I think you said it. That's correct. Yeah, that's right. That's right. A constitutional parliamentary system. Yeah. So the way I would look at it is you vote for the party, not for there is a leader. We have a prime minister, like you have a president, but that prime minister is not as powerful as the president, and is more the party. So when I go to vote, I look at their policy, and this is the other thing. If you think about the party instead of the leader, you more think about the policies. You think, what are the policies of that party instead of, oh, that guy has a really good smile. Oh, that guy, he's really quick with it. It's not about just their personalities, right? It's not like I'm going to vote for him. I'm not going to vote for Trump because he makes jokes, right? Or that you don't have that as much. Sure, that's the difference between a prime minister and a president in current government around the world. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, that's right. Yeah, prime ministers don't have the same amount of power. They can't just do executive action to, you know, pardon people or do this and do that. So, and I think the whole pardon thing is a problem. I mean, I know there've been good pardons in the past with people with drug convictions and stuff, but with someone like Trump in power, think about what he could do, right? There might be people around him right now who in past times might have been too scared to break the law or to skirt right on the barrier of what is legal, right? I'm talking about business people, I'm talking about lawyers, all this sort of stuff. And 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 they could do things for Trump that might be unethical. And Trump could turn around to them and say, don't worry about it. I'll pardon you at the end of my term. So it doesn't matter what you do, you'll get pardoned. So he could, and there's no limits to his pardon. So he could have around him the dodgiest, most criminals around him, and they don't have to worry about going to prison because he's going to pardon them at the end. So I think, yeah, they are, yeah. And so I think that's crazy. Like, that's giving too much power to the president. And this is the crazy thing, right? In Australia, technically, we have a king, like, King Charles. In reality, he has no power in Australia. It's completely ceremonial. He has nothing power, right? But people will say, oh, but you're still part of that, the king and stuff. Well, the king doesn't even have power in England. This is actually a true story. In the 90s, in the UK, Tony Blair, who was the ex-prime minister, they were going to get rid of the king, the monarchs, right? Maxwell Pardon's coming. Yeah, Maxwell as well. They were going to get rid of the monarch, the kings in England and all the queens. And the reason they changed their mind was because they were bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in tourism, right? So they basically kept, this is hilarious. This is actually true. Hi, Danica. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. We're just talking about the King of England. But yeah, so, it's, so basically England only kept the monarchy there because they were bringing in tourism. So again, they don't have any powers. They can't really do anything. It's just, they're there before tourism. Really, that's all. People spend people come and see Buckingham Palace and all that stuff. And yeah, that's all. That's the only reason they're there. They don't have any power. They don't have power in England. They definitely don't have power in Australia. So, but the irony is that Trump is way more of a king. Trump has way more power than the actual King of England does, who has almost no power. So that's the irony of the whole thing. And again, in places like Australia, where I live, or the UK or Canada, the Prime Minister doesn't have the powers that Trump does, to pardon people or executive actions or ignore this or ignore that. You just couldn't do it. So I think it's a better system from that point of view. Having that one person that everyone looks to, like, it creates a cult of personality, thing. I'd rather look at the whole party. I want to see, okay, what are the Democrats as a whole? What's their policies? don't tell me about Joe Biden or, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's important to have a good salesperson. And I think basically in America, the president is basically the salesperson. Pretty sure if the country has a constitution, it cannot, by definition, have a true monarch. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't. There is no, there is, yeah, as I said before, the king is just a ceremonial thing. He has no power. Yeah, it's just for tourism. It's for tourism. And so, but in America, you have this thing with a constitution, figurehead, right? Yeah, yeah, he's just a figurehead. Exactly. He's just a figurehead. Yeah. Um, and I do think that England will get rid of him because the Queen is now dead. I think eventually they will get rid of the monarchy. I think, especially now that the Queen has passed away. Yeah. I think they were waiting out of respect for the Queen to not do anything. But I do think eventually the monarch will probably go because they don't do anything. Also with Prince Andrew at the moment with the Epstein thing, so it's probably not a good time to be. You've got Harry living in America as an influencer with Meghan. It's really not. There's not really much happening there anymore. Princess Diana's gone, all that stuff. I guarantee you, if they were talking about getting rid of them in the 90s and kept them for tourism, so people visit Bucket, I guarantee you they'll be talking about it now. Now that the Queen has died, and Prince Harry and all that, Prince William and that. I don't think they're that exciting. Is that what happened with Andrew? I don't follow the news much. Yeah, so Prince Andrew was friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and there was an Australian who's part of the story. She killed herself, um, and she was living in Perth, which is a city of Australia. And anyway, she was at Mar-a-Lago, preach brother, um, Dave. Yeah, she was at Mar-a-Lago with Trump. This young girl, this is back in I think the 90s, and Jeffrey Epstein came in, and she was working as a masseuse at Mar-a-Lago, where Trump was, and Jeffrey Epstein came to Mar-a-Lago and said, "Oh," and basically poached her. I don't think Trump knew about it. I don't know, but poached her, and then Max, you know, yeah, and basically they got her across, um, and basically, yeah, and then basically trafficked her out to Epstein's friends. And one of the women that they got her to sleep with was Prince Andrew. And so Prince Andrew has always denied this, even though there's photos of her. She was, I think, 17 at the time. So legally, it's not illegal in England. The age of consent in England is 16. So legally, it wasn't, but in sense of that she was taken advantage of. So it's not so much that he's going to face legal, but it's more of a moral thing. And so, yeah, so Prince Andrew is now being stripped of all his titles, right? So he's no, everything's been stripped. Although he's still going to be living on he's going to still be going to living a very good life. But so, but yeah, so again, like these people are basically, it's basically again, in UK they're just seen as like things they're becoming more outdated all the time. So it doesn't really make any sense to be around that sort of thing. I think right, the royal family has to be immaculate because it was originally ruled by the divine right. Prince Andrew, Trump, and the rest never thought it was going to come back to bite them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. I know. They thought they were going to get away with it. And, you know, even though there's no criminal charges against Prince Andrew, the fact that you have a guy in his 40s, like, you know, taking advantage of a 17-year-old, that's pretty bad. Um, so, especially especially with his power that he had. And when she came back to Australia, she suffered from depression, and eventually she committed suicide. It's disturbing, yeah. So I think I think from the Epstein thing, what's interesting to me is that um, they lost MAGA. Trump lost a lot of the MAGA people in terms of enthusiasm, but he never lost people in the sense of how many people are going to vote for him, because they ever do the voting, or they do the polling, and they go, what percentage of Republicans want Trump to be president, and it's still 91%. It's always between like 92 or 89%. Just bought her book. Oh wow, excellent. Yeah, I haven't read her book, but I've seen excerpts of it. I've read excerpts of it. Um, and yeah, it's I mean, I don't know how Prince Andrew, you know, could have because we knew about this years ago, and Prince Andrew just lied about it. But yeah, so I think Trump has somehow managed to keep, even after all this, the Epstein thing, not releasing the file, he still managed to keep a big chunk of his base. Um, which to me is just crazy. And I'm talking about Republicans here. I'm talking about people who say they vote for Republicans. Obviously, independents and swing voters and all that, he's lost a lot more of those people. But it almost shows that there's almost nothing he can do. I can't find time to read books because Substack takes all my time. Sorry, Dave. Sorry. I'm sorry, Dave. I take responsibility for that. No. Look, you know what you should do, Dave? Audiobooks. Audiobooks, I prefer to read, but when I do a walk, sometimes I like to go on a long walk. I just do audiobooks. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, or next time you come here, Dave, I will read passages of her book on Substack. So that way you're getting both things. You're getting Substack and you're actually finding out what's inside the book. That could be a good thing. So yeah, so I think basically MAGA, you can't. It's almost impossible to break MAGA. If Epstein wasn't going to do it, then I don't think anything is going to get them away from that side of it. Yeah. Um, the other thing I want to talk about was Zoran Mandani. Yeah, sorry, I missed something. Whose book are you discussing there? Oh, we're discussing the book of the person, but I'll have to listen while I'm sleeping. Oh, right. Okay. We can do that. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, just let me know times, Dave, when you're sleeping, and I'll go on Substack and I'll start reading. Yeah. Um, I think sorry. Oh, the book. Yeah. So, um, her name has just completely slipped my mind. Defray. Her name is Defray. Yeah, Defray. She's one of the victims of Epstein, who is an Australian who committed suicide about 6 months ago. But before she committed suicide, she wrote a book about her experiences with Epstein. Yeah. So you can read that. Yeah. Um, so yeah, so she was like a masseuse, nanny, that sort of thing. Gazelle Maxwell took real advantage of her, basically groomed her, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it was the whole thing is a little bit crazy. Glad she wrote the book first, but that's awful. Yeah, yeah, it is, and a lot of her book is about Prince Andrew. So that's why a lot of his titles have now been stripped because even though people knew about that, now that it's been put into a book, it's like yeah. I mean, he's still proclaiming his innocence, um, but yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about before I have to go is Zoran Mandani, and I just want to say that I think there's been a lot of a lot of people hyperventilating about Zoran Mandani, and I'm even saying this to someone like from centre left, right? Not even someone from the far left, right? The amount of people who are like freaking out about him to some degree, I kind of feel like they're more worried about him than they are about Trump. So, um, I yes, yeah, up and down, yeah, and I wrote something on Substack the other day, like a note, and I said something like. If you're like a MAGA person or a Democrat centrist, more worried about Mandami than you are about Trump, I mean, maybe you're the problem, that sort of thing. And you don't even have to. This is the thing. I actually started the note with, you don't even have to agree with everything he says, right? You don't even have to agree with his policies, but there is this exaggeration. Um, there is exaggeration that is like beyond belief. Like, that he's like this full on comment. He is not a communist. He's not going to bring. Yeah, he's not going to bring in, right, communism into New York City as a mayor. That is impossible. Even if he wants to, he couldn't do that, right? Um, this is also my prediction, and I want anyone to bookmark this, but of course, because social media is still a fault. Yeah, bookmark this. What I'm about to say. I think in 2 years' time, if he's elected as mayor, I think there will be more people disappointed with him on the left than there is on the right. And that's because I don't think he's going to be able to get through everything he can. And there will always be some people on the left who go, you should have did this. Even with Bernie Sanders, you get that, right? And so even though these people on the right are losing their mind, I guarantee you it will be people on the left who will be saying things like, hey, you said you were going to do this, you didn't do that. You didn't say you're going to do that, right? And it will happen. And he will cop more shit from the left than he does from the right. And all these people that said he was going to bring in communism and it was going to be the end of America, they all will go quiet, right? Because he will govern like a progressive sentiment, because the further the left one goes, the more progressive. Yeah, exactly. But he can't, even if he wanted to bring in stuff, you can't. As a mayor in New York, I'm saying this as an Australian, and most people should know this more than me, right? Is that you can't, as a mayor, just you gotta get permission to get money. You have to get permission to freeze rents. There is assembly people. There's commissions that he has to go through. He's got to get the governor on board. All this sort of stuff. He can't. It's not like Trump giving executive. It's just not the way it works. But also, he's also coming across very pragmatic. Like, for example, he talks about the grocery shops in the desert areas, and he says, I want to open up 4 of them. And he says, if it doesn't work, I'm going to get rid of it. Right, the mayorship of New York is more powerful than actually powerful. Mayorship is more symbolically powerful. Yeah, yeah. But he still needs to get stuff from other people, like in terms of money and stuff like that. Like, okay, but I think he's coming across quite pragmatic. He's saying, if something doesn't work out, I'm not going to do it. If this doesn't work out, I'm not going to do it. But you never hear that from the media. All you hear is something he said 4 years ago. Oh, he tweeted about this, even though he will go on TV and say, I don't believe that anymore. Dems leadership is concerned about Republicans framing him as a communist. I like him exactly. He's pragmatic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. See, Dave, I don't actually. So I think the leadership of the Democratic Party don't actually understand the American um, uh, uh, people anymore. They've lost. They don't understand. They still think it's 2012. They don't understand that Zoran Mandami. Trump says crazy stuff all the time. Trump says, if you go back into Trump's past, they have no, people can go back. Trump said this 10 years ago, 20. No one cares anymore. The days of people being cancelled because they said something 5 years, they're over. And that's over for Zoran Mandami as well. People don't care what he said 5 years ago. People don't care because the it's all changed now. That's no longer the landscape. But to Democrats, they still think like it was the days when, I don't know if you remember, the first election that I ever followed in America was 2004, and it was Howard Dean. He was leading in the primaries, and he did this screech. He went like that, like in this screech. And after that, because of just that minor thing, he lost. He got pushed aside. It was the most minor thing in the world that if it happened today, it wouldn't even. But he lost because of that screech. It was the most. Okay, you just missed a crazy one in 2000. Yeah. So it was insane. Like it was really insane that he lost because of that minor thing. In 2025, no one gives a shit about that stuff. No one gives a shit about what you said 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's just Trump killed that. And he killed it not just for his own party, he killed it for the Democratic Party as well. So, so all that people care about is cost of living. If you talk about cost of living and you talk about cost of living, cost of living, cost of living. That's what people care about. And the other thing is that we're not talking about the same media environment. So all those people who saw Howard Dean, that was back in the days when everyone was watching the same news. So everyone got that piece of information. These days, if someone does something, only a quarter of the population actually sees it, and the rest of the people don't even know it actually happened. Probably us millennials with our craziness. If you ask some elements of Gen Z, yeah. So that's what I think. I think I've got to go now. But my opinion is, I think that if you bookmark this, as I said before, 2 years from now, if Zoran wins, he'll get more shit from the left than he does from the right. Guarantee it. Yeah, because he will govern as just the centre left, maybe more progressive person, but it's not going to. Yeah, and the right is just going to go quiet. Yeah. Thank you for your thoughts. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for coming back. Sorry about before. My dog is doing fantastic now. So thank you. Thank you for the love hearts. Thanks for talking to everyone. Thank you, Dave from California. Thank you, Lakias. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. See you guys.